Namaste, and welcome to a live edition of Live, Love, Engage. I am Gloria Grace Rand, and I want to welcome those of you who are watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, as well as welcome those of you who are listening to this, who are listening on your favorite podcast platform. I'm so delighted to have you with us today because we're going to be talking about clutter and how to declutter with a fabulous woman who I am going to bring onto the show right now. And her name is Krystal Holm. So welcome to Live, Love, Engage, Krystal.
Thanks, Gloria.
Well, let me tell you all about her. So, some about her, and she can probably tell you more, but she is a Feng Shui designer and clutter expert who helps soul-driven leaders declutter and design a workspace that empowers them to create the life and business they want. And I love that idea. I've studied Feng Shui a little bit, and since moving into a new apartment, I know it was so nice to be able to start fresh and not have too much clutter around because it can be a problem. But before we get into all of that, I always like to start off and asking our guests to just share a little bit about what interested you in Feng Shui and decluttering and how you got to be the expert that you are now.
Well, I feel like it was sort of destiny. Like it was sort of always a thing. Even when I was a little girl, I loved doing interior design. It was sort of just always a path of mine. I would say I was introduced to like energy work even as a child too. So that was sort of something that was always on my radar. When I went to school to become an interior designer, I was really introduced more formally to Feng Shui. I had to write a paper for my psychology class on something related to my field of study. And so I chose to write a paper about the psychology of, the flow of energy in your space and basically about Feng Shui, which didn't really help me understand it at all at the time, but it definitely intrigued me. It intrigued me to the point that I really felt like, this makes sense to me. The flow of energy patterns in our space and how we relate to our space, it all made a whole lot of sense. So I really started just trying to like apply it to my own life more than anything. I'd always sort of had a vision of owning my own business, but wasn't really having the success in life that I wanted to have for myself. And so Feng Shui sort of seemed like the answer to that, if I could just figure it out. And I tried applying it for a few years, and I was working in my career as an interior designer, and my boss pulled our entire design team together for over a project that had been submitted to the client and rejected because the Feng Shui was all wrong.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's surprising. It's like, gee, you think you guys are the experts. So
Well, it was an interior design firm. Nobody there knew Feng Shui. And these were international clients from China. So Feng Shui was more commonplace there, and they knew about it. They not only knew about it, they knew when it was obvious. I didn't know how much they knew, but when my boss pulled the team together and was like, "Can anybody help? Does anybody know anything about Feng Shui?" I was literally the only person to sort of raise my hand and volunteer and say, "I know Feng Shui. I can help." And she handed me this multi-million-dollar project and said, "Okay, fix it." My first week on the job, I was sort of like, okay, well, let's see what I really know and what I don't. And, the terror of what don't I know? What do they know that I don't know? Like imposter syndrome or whatever we're going to call it. Right.
Yeah.
But I really fell in love with this process of not just making it aesthetically pleasing, not just making
Right.
it what they want it to look like and
Yeah.
sort of pulling the vision together, but also energetically getting them into alignment with the space so
Mhm.
that it's truly a symbiotic relationship, which is what your relationship with your home is or should be. Um, it's a symbiotic relationship, whether that lifts you up or sucks you back down is all relates to how we live in the space. And so I really fell in love with it there. And I was like, okay, I have to really study this. Like, I don't know what I don't know. And so I went back to school. I found a college that taught traditional Chinese feng shui. And I went back to school and pretty much learned. I mean, to become a feng shui master, right? I learned all about feng shui and then I started taking on clients because it's more than just book learning. I really needed to understand the implementation of it and how it works in in real time. Like how does it really work? Not just like the facts and the figures of the calculations and the numerics of how to do it. And so I started taking on all these clients, and really trying to. I was on my own healing journey myself then, and so I was in a coaching program working with a woman to help me with my love life. To be honest, I was trying to kind of heal my relationship with men,
Mhm.
um, and to find love again in my life, really. And so I
Yeah.
was in this like year-long coaching program with 50 other women. And I was
Mm.
like, you know what? I can help them like feng shui their place and help
Mm.
them create room for love in their life. And
Right.
so I'd sort of based this idea on I want to start a company that this is what's going to help women with this. Um and so I started help all of the other women that were in the group with me. We started doing the feng shui of their place and every one of them inevitably got stuck with decluttering. They
Yeah.
could not let go of the clutter. And so I found myself rather than doing any feng shui or any interior design, all of my work with these women was around talking about their clutter and coaching them around basically what it is, right? It's a mirror. It's a mirror for everything that we think and everything that we believe and everything that keeps us stuck right where we are, right? For them it was stuck in the past of
Mhm.
old loves and old relationships, whether they were divorced or widowed or had been an abusive relate like me. I grew up in a very abusive household, so I had
Mm.
not only an abusive childhood, but then I perpetuated that with multiple abusive
Yeah.
relationships because
Yeah.
that was all I knew about love was that
Mhm.
love is abusive. Um, and so I was sort of like coaching these women around their clutter and around what it meant. And it was really taking me all the way back into this psychology where I started with feng shui. That was when I really kind of came full circle back to the psychology of it because in feng shui it teaches all about the relationship with your home and how it's a reflection and a mirror, for yourself, right? It's this
Right.
symbiotic relationship. But we don't talk about clutter beyond it stagnates the energy and it's bad. But when I
Mm.
started really actually working with these women and really digging into the clutter, I'd never had a problem decluttering. Like that was not for me. So it was easy for me to coach them through and almost very instinctive. And then I was like, well, this is fascinating for me. So it would like take me to research, like
Mhm.
trying to find out solutions to talk about these things. So I really started digging into, like I say, the psychology of it and
Right.
more about the clutter. And I became this sort of on the job expert of talking about clutter. And a few years into it, I decided, my business is not really taking off all that well. And I hired a coach to sort of help teach me the business side of turning my expertise into into a business, right? A marketable business. And she was the one that invited me to like start creating all this content, to put it out there for people. And I was like, well, that just, I wanted to create something useful, right? And not just talk on the camera about nothing for 30 days to get over my fear of cameras. I wanted to make something useful. And I started making this like, it was a 30-day challenge that I created to declutter for spring cleaning.
Hmm.
And as I was doing these little videos every single day, I was like decluttering my own home and coaching, but it was like coaching myself
Mhm.
in this process, like in the way that I had always done with clients, but I was using myself as the example for these videos to teach. And all of
Right.
a sudden I was in the hot seat or the client seat. And it was like, oh, wow, I have clutter that I didn't ever realize that I had. And I started really digging into it. And it really helped me to even develop my own framework, my own method around clutter and decluttering and how I work with clients and how I take them through this whole process of, not just creating a space, but really
Right.
creating a space that is fully energetically in alignment with them, with their vision. That's why I call it making a 3D vision board, because it really creates room for you to become the person that you have to have the life that you want.
Mm.
Um, but it all starts in the clutter.
Yeah. Now, when you say that you discovered that you had clutter, I mean, are you talking that it was physical clutter, or is it more of a mental clutter that you were dealing with?
It's both.
It
It's
was?
both.
Okay.
Physical clutter is a reflection of our mental and emotional clutter. And it was something that I knew, like intellectually, I'd read about it
Okay.
and I could teach about it, but it wasn't like it was something I'd not experienced personally. I'd never been
Right.
stuck in clutter. I'd
Okay.
always been easily able to declutter without a problem. But at right about the same time shortly before I had hired this coach, actually, my business was still part-time, right? I
Right.
was still making
Okay.
that transition from, taking on clients to a full-time business, which is why I hired the coach in the first place.
Right.
But at that same time, I was working full-time. I mean, I
Mm.
had a full-time job and my business was part-time on the side. And I had an injury at work, a pretty serious injury,
Oh.
actually, that led to like a 3-year workman's comp battle before I could get surgery. And
Oh.
during all of that time, like my body deteriorated. I was on bed rest. I couldn't walk.
Oh, man.
I couldn't really get medical treatment because of the insurance people and
Mm.
all of that stuff that went on. And so during all that time, I couldn't clean my house. I literally couldn't physically declutter my house, but also it was a big battle for me emotionally and mentally around my self-worth, because I was literally being rejected for medical care from people that are unqualified, just like the situation we're in right now, where we got lawyers telling women they can't have abortions when their doctor is saying, yeah, but she might die, right? We've got completely unqualified people. This is the case in insurance, right? You've got
Yeah.
these insurance people who are not doctors telling
Right.
me I can't go to the doctor because I don't really need it. They don't even know what I had done yet. It took them a year and a half to diagnose the fact that I had an injury.
Oh
They
my
sent
god.
me to 5 quote unquote independent medical examiners that the insurance company selected and paid and told them what to say, so that they would tell them that I didn't have an injury.
Yeah.
I
Mm.
literally had one doctor say there was nothing wrong with me except for I was old, fat, and lazy, and angry that they changed my paycheck 11 months after my injury. Yeah.
Oh my
So
gosh.
they would just deny all of my doctor's appointments. Like they wouldn't let me go to a specialist. They wouldn't let me see anybody that could actually, right, determine what I had done wrong. So it took like a year and a half. And in that time, I my house, everything and my life kind of fell apart. But it brought
Yeah.
up all of this stuff about self-worth because like I mentioned, I grew up in a very abusive home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was told a lot how worthless I was, how unlovable I was, what a horrible piece of garbage I was, and how not good enough I was. And so as as I was facing all of this with these insurance people, all of those same feelings were like coming up, right? And so as I was kind of trying to stuff them down, right? And I'm talking about this clutter. Yeah, all of it was just sort of coming up at the same time and it was just this like light bulb moment of, oh, I get it. Like I get it now, 100% get it. And it totally changed the way I work with clients. I actually completely shifted my business model around it, and developed a whole framework for how I work with clients to help them create a space where they are empowered to change the world, because
Mm,
that's what we're here for.
yeah, definitely. So, why is it really important for people to be able to declutter and really to be able to create a space? What would you say? Or now, you know what? We've really covered that already. I would say if someone is facing a challenge, maybe they're feeling like they're stuck right now, what would you say to them to look at? What would be like the first thing that they should look at, especially coming from your point of view?
You really have to look at your clutter. Um, I personally have a 5-step method for decluttering. It's where I start with each and every one of my clients, but it's a different way of looking at your clutter. We can't we can't focus on most people, right, that are in this space around decluttering, and that's their expertise. They want to focus on the what you're getting, like what you're keeping, and get rid of all the rest. I actually want to listen to what the clutter is telling me about why I'm stuck right here. um and so you really have to start there.
That's interesting. So, what what would clutter be telling you? So, what does it tell? Like some of your clients, what have you found? Are there some similarities and things?
Yeah, mostly it all I tend to find that it tends to fall into 3 categories. um Either scarcity, worthiness, or obligation.
Mm,
And those are the 3 most common types of clutter that I find that people have. And while the stories will be different, the you know the mental and emotional part will be different, and the physical will also be different. The relationship is always the same.
mm,
And so that physical clutter is always the reflection of the mental and emotional clutter. And so when they go through this method that I've developed for decluttering, it really helps them to to what is the word that I want? To understand that relationship,
mm,
to I don't want to say create it, but to have an acknowledgement of it, to have a
mm,
realization of it, and then to um develop it, right? In Or strengthen it, right? In the same way that you would train as an athlete. Um you want to train this muscle too, because it's very important, right? As humans, we're either in a state of growth or we're in a state of stagnation, which is dying. And so you're either growing or you're staying the same, right? You're static,
right.
in stasis. But stasis is a state of death. Um, so because we're always in this state of growth, we're always going to it's sort of like a perpetual state of motion, but we're always going to be creating new clutter. Because we're always changing,
Mm,
therefore things that are not clutter today can become clutter tomorrow. People are also hardwired to buy and acquire things. It's just in our human nature. And so therefore, because we are constantly in this state of acquiring new, we
right.
sort of have to let go of the old because it's no longer in alignment with who we are. And so that's where it becomes clutter. There's a stage, right? It's never, well, I shouldn't say it's never clutter to begin with, because some of it is clutter to begin with. Some of it is clutter from the moment it's purchased, but it's purchased as a result of the beliefs that we have.
Mm,
And so we settle for things that are clutter instead of buying things that we truly love. Um,
mhm,
for whatever reason, like maybe we can't afford what we really love, so we settle for something less. Or maybe we can afford it, but we don't think we're worth it, right? We can't justify it.
gotcha.
So
Yeah.
therefore, and so some things are clutter from the beginning, and then sometimes they just become clutter as we evolve.
Mm,
And so it's always a process of decluttering. Um, But if you don't know how to declutter, it's like running on a treadmill, right? You're never going to get anywhere. You
Right.
might be getting exercise, but you're not actually seeing any scenery. You're not actually getting from point A to point B. You're just running in place. And decluttering is kind of the same. If you don't learn to listen to your clutter, you're just running in place, continually throwing stuff out, but you're not actually using it as a tool to help you grow and to help you
Mm,
see this is where I'm stuck right now and this is where I need to go next to
mm.
become the next best version of myself, right? To let go of my baggage and move forward into a healthier version of me.
Wow. Well, and I think you just answered the question I was going to ask you was like how could someone, attempt to declutter, get it wrong? And it seems like you've kind of answered that, but what do you think? Maybe you even want to expand on that a little bit. What do you
Well,
think?
there's 5 steps to decluttering
Okay.
that I have discovered in, 20 plus years of working with clients. There are 5 steps to decluttering. Most people start with step 1 and go straight to step 5, and that's where they get it wrong.
Ah,
Because we've really been taught and we worship this idea of fake it till you make it. And so we pretend that everything is different than what it is in reality. And the fact is you have to face it till you make it. And that's where the clutter is. That is where that becomes the solution of facing what's keeping you small so that you can play a bigger game.
mm, ooh. That was really good. And I love that you've reframed it to face it until you make it instead of faking it. Because you're right. That's a lot of people will say, "Oh yeah, just fake it till you make it. You'll be okay." But you're right to really all you're going to wind up doing is just sweeping stuff under the carpet and
Right.
just
And a lot of us are taught that as kids. Because I think a lot of us have more abusive childhoods than what we know or are
Mhm.
even aware of. Like a
Yeah,
lot of us are not even taught like, oh, wait a minute. Some people think they had this wonderful childhood only to realize that, yeah, no, there's a lot of abusive patterns that have been generationally passed down
right.
that are not healthy, that are creating these adult responses from the trauma of the childhood. And so being able to heal that and move forward from that, um, yeah, that's a game changer.
Well, I appreciate that. And I want to ask you, well, actually, I'm going to ask you two questions. So the first one is, what what do you love most about the work that you do?
Um, watching the evolution,
Mm,
watching the evolution of women who come to me feeling cluttered and unsure that they will ever be heard, that they will ever make a difference, that they will ever
mm,
matter, um, or that the work that they do will ever matter and make a difference. Um, and then doing this work with them for because when I work with them one on one, we work together for 3 months on the clutter, not just the
mm,
physical clutter, but the mental and the emotional clutter too. And
right.
watching them at the end of that 3 months walk out the door like powerhouses, just ready to tear down the patriarchy and rewrite the world in a
Mm,
way that is equitable and, you know, good.
mhm. I like that. So, what are you curious about right now?
Oh, goodness. What am I curious about? Just anything? Like
Yeah.
um I am I am curious about writing,
Mm,
actually. Um I'm wanting to learn how to use the medium of writing better, um, and being more articulate in expressing my message through the written word.
well, awesome. Well, that's good. And I'm sure you will figure it out because you you are a student. You've already demonstrated that you love to be able to learn new things because you've wanted to know about feng shui and you learned about it. And I do love. I meant to talk about this earlier, but I do think this is something that the universe is a great gift for us, that you came full circle. When you said that you came back to like the psychology of it, because I think it's interesting that we get led down these paths and then it's like the stuff at the beginning we may think we don't need, and then yet it comes back. So
I keep coming full circle. I keep
yeah.
coming full circle. One of my biggest traumas from childhood, I wrote my first book when I was 11.
Mm.
And it was a book about being molested.
Oh.
And my mother found it and shamed me for writing it.
Oh. Mm.
Because she knew that her husband was a pedophile. She knew before she married him because I told her, and she married
Mm.
him anyway. And
Oh,
so she was
wow.
very angry at me for writing this book
Mhm.
and outing him.
Yeah.
And so she tried to, blame it on my father and say he was the child molester. And she tried to, she shamed me for writing this book and how dare I write such vulgarity.
Mm.
My mother is a a Christian nationalist. We'll just call it what it is. My family are white supremacist Christian nationalists.
Mm.
That is the family I grew up in, and uh, so they shamed me for writing that book, and I have had a hard time writing ever since.
Mm.
Um, but it's been a thing, right, since I started this company. Of
Yeah.
you have to write, you have to be able
Yeah.
to write, and so I feel like that's my last big hurdle. I'm probably wrong, but I've faced a whole lot of things that have had to be healed, right?
Yeah.
Starting with, healing my relationship with women, and then my relationship with men, and then my relationship with myself. And then, now it's some of these other things around, my relationship with being able to write and express myself that
Yeah.
way and reach people that way. I want to write a book. And another book.
That's right.
and
Yes. Well,
and so that's important to me.
all right. Well, awesome. Well, I wish you luck with that, and I'm sure that you will be able to do that, because you're a formidable woman. I know that when you set your mind to something, I can tell you get it done, and so that's good. Now, if someone has been listening to this and really is realizing that, yeah, I think I need some help with decluttering, what's the best place for them to get some help from you?
Well, I mentioned it earlier that I have my own proprietary decluttering method, and I would like to give that to your audience. They can download it for free at declutteryourmindset.com, and I'll send them a few emails and explain it to them, and kind of talk about it a little bit more, because it's a different kind of method. It's a different system than what they're probably have ever heard before. But
Yeah.
that'll get them in touch with me, and they're welcome to hit reply to any email I send and have a conversation with me.
Oh,
Let's
awesome. Well, that's great, and I will be sure and put that in the show notes, as well, and, that's a wonderful thing. So thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your wisdom about decluttering. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Gloria.
Yeah, and I wanna thank all of you who are watching, and I know we had a few people watching on Facebook today and commenting, so I can't seem to comment back to them on StreamYard, so I apologize, but I'm not
Oh,
ignoring you, I
is
swear.
there comments? Is there questions that we need to respond to,
No,
or
it's
no?
just a hi and a thank you. So
Oh,
so that was good.
hi.
But yeah.
Thank you.
So I do appreciate all of you. Yeah, yes, and Deb says great info. So it's
Thanks, Deb.
awesome. So again, I want to thank you for being here. Thank all of you for watching and for also listening to the replay of this. I appreciate you. And as always, before we go, I encourage you to go out today and every day and live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically.